The Jets have fired head coach Robert Saleh.
The New York Mets could make history tonight if they can clinch at Citi Field.
The villainous, unsettling, classless San Diego Padres take Game 3.
The Dodgers are one game away from elimination.
It's a recruiting flip, and we haven't done this in a while.
Did he quit on the team?
The Locked On Podcast Network presents The Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
The Jets have fired head coach Robert Saleh.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast.
There was enormous news that broke Tuesday morning. The Jets have fired head coach Robert Saleh. We're going to talk about what this means for the Jets going forward. We're going to talk about why this should have been done back in January. But first, we're going to talk about why this doesn't really change the underlying problems with this football team. Now, I've been pretty consistent over the last couple of weeks, my views on Robert Saleh. In fact, I think I've been pretty consistent, going back to last season, my views on Robert Saleh. I think firing him is absolutely a justified move. I think if you look at the performance, there just have not been enough wins. He had 3 straight losing seasons to begin his career. Very rare that you get a 4th season when you start your career with 3 straight losing seasons with a team. The record's not been good enough. The offense has been dismal during his tenure. The team has not played aggressively enough. His in-game decisions have been very shaky. I think we can say Robert Saleh is a bad head coach. And over the last couple of weeks, the team's performance has been to the point where I think a firing has been justified. And I've said this on the show in the past. If you're new to the show, this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets, and we have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. I've said that I think there are 2 reasons you make an in-season coaching change. One is if you have somebody on your staff who you think can right the ship. And the second is if you think that things are so bad with your head coach that it's worth just changing things up for the sake of changing things up, and maybe you can strike lightning in a bottle with somebody else. Maybe just a change in the dynamics can spark something in your team. I think the Jets were clearly in the latter category. I have no issues with the Jets changing coaches today, but I think that the Jets are trying to sell this as everything will be fine now. All reports indicate that this was not a decision made by general manager Joe Douglas. This was a Woody Johnson decision. And I've been covering the Jets for a long time, and I've been following the Jets for an even longer time. So I know the way Woody Johnson thinks pretty well. He operates in some pretty distinctive ways. And one of the issues with Woody Johnson is Woody Johnson doesn't want to be bothered with the hard business of building a quality football team, because it's tough. You need to do things like value your draft picks. You need to focus on the premium positions. You need to invest in a scouting staff. You need to manage your cap correctly. Woody Johnson's not about that. Woody Johnson is always about the quick fix. He always thinks that there's like this one silver bullet that can fix your team. And the issue that I have right now with Woody Johnson, it's not that he fired Robert Saleh, who's a bad coach who the Jets will not miss. Like, let's be honest with that. I don't think anybody should be shedding a tear for Robert Saleh. He was very lucky to get even the start of a 4th season. My issue is just more what this says about the big picture of the way the Jets run things, where Woody Johnson always thinks the team's closer than it is. And he thinks that like one move will solve all the problems. And you see this happen when the Jets make a move for a big player that he pushes. And now you're seeing it when he fires the head coach. I'm sure in Woody Johnson's mind, he's got this idea that this is a 12 or 13 win team, and what's holding them back is the head coach. And once we get rid of the head coach, that's fine. Woody always thinks that there's like this one move you can make that will solve everything. And why am I saying that? Well, because the offensive coordinator is still here. The offensive line coach is still here. If we're talking for coaches who are responsible for this poor start this season, that's where we'd start. That's where we'd go. Now, if Nathaniel Hackett and Keith Carter, at least Hackett, were on their way out the door, this is a different discussion. Then we can say, you know what, the Jets are really trying. There's only so much you can do in season, but the Jets are trying to address the root problems on this team, because the way this offense is coordinated is a problem. It's a very unimaginative offense. It's not an offense that puts any stress on opposing defenses. The play design is bad. The lack of creative formations are bad. There's nothing cutting edge about this offense. And the offensive line, where the Jets have underperforming players, but there are too many instances where guys don't know their assignments. And that goes directly to coaching, especially when we're talking the offensive line coach. I'm a big skeptic about, how much credit or how much blame position coaches get for their unit's performance. But offensive line is one area that's an exception, because on an offensive line, you have 5 guys and they need to work as a unit, and you're only as strong as your weakest link. And you've seen through the years, many offensive line coaches get more out of their players than their collective talent would suggest they're capable of. And Keith Carter is getting less out of the Jets offensive line than their talent level would suggest. These guys are still here. And firing Robert Saleh, look, I've complained a lot about how this team was not ready to play. I've complained a lot about Saleh's philosophical issues, because Saleh is the guy who coined the phrase "the race to 20" last year. His philosophy is not that we need to score a lot of points in the NFL of 2024. His idea is that we let the defense win. We try and win a low-scoring game, and that just doesn't work in today's NFL. I'm skeptical of the way Saleh manages games. I don't think he's aggressive enough. I don't think he uses analytics enough. These things could improve under Jeff Ulbrich. And Saleh has reached a point where he's so clearly out of his element that I think a change was justified. But I don't think we can sit here today and say the season's saved. I think too many Jets fans, and quite frankly, the owner, are looking for some magical move that's going to resurrect this team. Look, firing Robert Saleh will improve the things that I mentioned. Firing Robert Saleh will not make Aaron Rodgers 7 years younger. And if we're talking about issues on this team right now, I think you have to look to Rodgers, who's not a bad quarterback, not completely washed up, but a guy who's clearly in decline. Does not move anywhere near as well as he did in the past. That's an issue. Guy who's afraid of being hit, guy whose body may not hold up the rest of the season. That's a problem. The play of the offensive line, and the coach. Look, if you want to say coaching, the coach who's responsible for the offensive line is still here. The play of the offense, which Saleh is ultimately responsible for the results, but he's not the guy implementing the offense. The guys who are implementing the offense are still here. And as we talked about on our first episode today, Jets have some guys who are underperforming. And I don't know, maybe firing Saleh will put a spark into them, but Sauce Gardner is not having a Sauce Gardner season. Quinnen Williams is not having a Quinnen Williams season. Breece Hall is not having a Breece Hall season. Garrett Wilson, we started to see some flashes the second half, so maybe he's starting to turn it around, but Jets have too many other big-time players who just aren't producing big-time results. Now, again, maybe seeing this coaching change lights a fire under the team. I think in the short run, sometimes you see a team get fired up. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Jets come out with a lot of emotion Monday night against the Buffalo Bills. But I think if we're looking for something that's going to save the season, I think if we're looking for something that would get rid of a bad coach, then you found it. If you're looking for a move that was justified, you found it. If you're looking for a move that is going to radically change the trajectory of the 2024 New York Jets, well, you've solved a few problems, but there are a lot more problems that remain. This team's problems, look, head coach was a problem, but there were many, many deeper problems. And I think when the owner looks at this team, it's not so much that he's not objective, it's that he doesn't know what he's watching. He thought that we trade for Aaron Rodgers and we're a Super Bowl team. So now that the Jets aren't looking like a Super Bowl team, he has to find somebody to scapegoat. And look, I'm not saying scapegoat in the sense Robert Saleh is blameless. Robert Saleh has earned a lot of the blame. Robert Saleh deserved to be fired. I am not shedding any tears for Robert Saleh. But I think when we're talking about expectations, and we're talking about just the overall way the team was run, this is vintage Jets. This is vintage Woody Johnson.
Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you can place that bet on, how about the first game of Week 6 of the NFL, for example. Thursday night features an NFC West rivalry game, the Niners and the Seahawks. FanDuel has Geno Smith and Brock Purdy pretty close in passing yards on their props. The total for Purdy's passing yards, 253.5, while Smith, 248.5. The passing game hasn't been consistently there for the beaten up Niners this year. I might be tempted to take Smith to have the most passing yards, which FanDuel has at even odds. So what are you waiting for? That's FanDuel.com to get started. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The New York Mets could make history tonight if they can clinch at Citi Field.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast.
The New York Mets have a chance to make history tonight. It might be a little bit surprising, but the more you think about it, the more it'll make sense. The New York Mets have never had a champagne shower at Citi Field. The ballpark opened in 2009, and across the 16-year history of this ballpark, the Mets have never clinched anything at home. 2015, they went to the playoffs. They clinched that in Cincinnati. They then clinched a spot in the NLCS by beating the Dodgers in Game 5. That game took place in Los Angeles. They were the home team for Game 1 of the NLCS as they won the division. That the Cubs had a better record, but they were the wild card team. The Mets swept the Cubs, so they ended up clinching a spot in the World Series at Wrigley Field. And then, of course, we know what happened in that World Series. 2016, the Mets clinched a playoff berth in Philadelphia. Then they lost to the Giants in the wild card round. Didn't make the playoffs again until 2022. They clinched that in Milwaukee. Then, of course, they lost in the wild card round. And then this year, they clinch a playoff berth in Atlanta. They clinch a spot in the NLDS, winning the wild card series in Milwaukee. So this franchise has never had a celebration in their own ballpark. Obviously, there's been a couple of celebrations against the Mets. The wild card in 2016, the Royals in 2015, the Padres in 2022. The Mets have a chance to get that monkey off their back and finally pop some bottles in Citi Field for themselves if they can win tonight. And that's a nice little carrot to go after. Obviously, the most important thing is advancing. And you're going up against a Phillies team that has been pushing up on what has felt like a championship for a couple of years. 2022, they get so close. They don't get the job done. Last year, they blew it to the Diamondbacks in the NLCS. And this year, they start off the season 44-19, heading into that London series. They were the best team in baseball. Here's the thing that those who are covering this series, particularly the broadcasters that are actually covering these games, AJ Pierzynski, Adam Wainwright, those in the national media, they have painted this series as one that the Phillies should win, or at least where these two teams are headed head-to-head, which I think is a fair enough characterization of where these teams are at, just based on the lineups they have, the starting rotations, and all of it. But if you really were paying attention this season, and if you look at that London series as a sort of line of demarcation, what these teams were heading into the London series and what they've been since, the Mets have been the best team in the National League East, and you can make an argument they've been, if not the best team in baseball, the best team in the National League. That is how good the Mets have been since that London series where they split it with the Phillies. The Phillies took Game 1, so they started their season 45-19, and from that point on, they were 50-48 over their final 98 games. The New York Mets, over their last 98 games, were 61-37. The Mets scored more runs. They hit more home runs. Their pitchers were better ERA as a team than the Phillies. In pretty much every facet, I didn't look at bullpen ERA. That might have been the one place where the Phillies had an edge. Every single facet from the London series on, from June 10th through up until now, the Mets have been a better team than the Philadelphia Phillies. They deserve this. That ball club has shown so much grit, and it was a blast watching what they did in Game 3, beating up on the Phillies, scoring early, scoring late, getting a great pitching performance by Sean Manaea, getting enough out of the bullpen to survive those final 6 outs and notch that victory. It was a great game. But we've seen the Mets jump out, hosting their first playoff game in multiple series across their history, getting that job done. You go back again, 2015. They faced the Dodgers to start it off. They split the first part of that division series, come back home, win Game 3 in a rout, lose Game 4. It's up to Jacob deGrom in Game 5. He gets the job done. Then against the Cubs, obviously it was a sweep. World Series, the Mets lose the first 2 games to the Royals, come home, have that big victory, and that would be the last time they won that season. So we've seen this. We've seen the Mets have that great homecoming in front of their fans. All the excitement that we saw bottled up with all the fans flooding into the ballpark off the 7 line, the grimaces that were all over the place, the OMG signs, everything was immaculate in that game 3. There was nothing that went against the Mets. It was exactly how you would have wanted it if it was in a Hollywood script. Now, this is a team that could absolutely lose game 4, go on the road in game 5, and get the job done. This is a Mets team that has taken the harder road. It would have been a lot easier if they weren't horrible in May. And if they were a decent team, they might have won this division from the Phillies, honestly. But they put themselves in a big hole. They climbed out of it. They took that uphill battle, and they ended up reaching that mountaintop, clinching a playoff berth in the day after the final day of the season. And then they go into the wild card round. They look like they're going to sweep it. They end up dropping game 2, blow that one, nearly lose game 3, come back and win. If the Mets didn't let go of game 2 in this series, they would have already swept. They were in position to win that second game. This is the time to not let up, not let your foot off the gas, to go out in game 4 and beat up on the Phillies again and leave it without a shadow of a doubt who the best team in the National League East was this year. Everyone thinks it was the Phillies because they were great in April and May and in the first half of June. They were awesome. Here's the thing, though. The Phillies brought back a team that has been together basically for the last 2 years. Yes, Trey Turner was not there in 2022. But other than Trey Turner, most of these pieces have been there. Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, Ranger Suarez, all there. Nick Castellanos, Kyle Schwarber, Bryce Harper, all there. Bryson Stott has been there since 2022, as has Alec Boehm, as has Brandon Marsh. This team, the Phillies, they started this season hot because they had that continuity. They started this season in a similar way to, if you look back at the best season in Mets franchise history, the 1986 Mets, right? They had 84 where they proved that they were really good. 85 come up just short. 86, they just rolled. That's what the beginning of this season looked like for the Phillies. When we were at that London series, at that time, there was talk, if you were covering the game, and I do that for just baseball, cover all 30 teams, we were writing articles talking about the Phillies being able to set a win record for the most wins in MLB history. That's how good they started. They haven't been that for a long time. The Mets have been the better team. And so as a fan, as you're going into this exciting game 4 with the chance to clinch, I would love nothing more than to see the Mets deliver the convincing series victory over Philly. Don't even let them get that hope back to go back to the bank and potentially knock the Mets out of this thing. I believe the Mets are a better team than the Phillies. And they have a chance at, 4 o'clock today instead of 5? Let me make sure the start time so I'm not talking out of school, right? Which is crazy that the Mets, so it is a 5 o'clock start. It'll be a 4 o'clock start if they play on Friday. At least that's what it's supposed to be right now. I think Major League Baseball is making a mistake there, by the way, putting what might be their best series in that afternoon slot, early evening slot. Regardless, the New York Mets have a chance to make it clear that they were the better team in this division, not only better than the Braves, which they've already proven, but that they were better than the Phillies, and they're a team that has a real shot at winning the World Series this year. Go out tonight in front of your home crowd, do it, and then be the first team that gets to pop bottles in that Citi Field clubhouse and celebrate the fact that you're going to the NLCS.
The villainous, unsettling, classless San Diego Padres take game 3 from...
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Padres bullpen absolutely shutting down the Los Angeles Dodgers. And I think that it's really important to talk about one in particular, and that's Tanner Scott. Because Tanner Scott, they gave up a lot. Now, granted, they gave up a lot because they also got Brian Hoeing, who was like not better than Tanner Scott. I don't want to say that, but he's low-key been like one of the better trade deadline acquisitions. And it's kind of amazing that they got him because he's also under contract for another year, which is really great. Now, don't get me wrong, pitchers, it's not a guarantee that they'll be better from year to year. And you could argue that there are some things with Brian Hoeing, right? He's got a little bit of a higher expected ERA, 4.93, at least in terms of the regular season. But his FIP and everything is still good. So still solid pitcher, but he's been really, really great for the Padres. So excited about that. But I will say that they did give up a lot. But Shohei Ohtani against Tanner Scott, he's 1 for 12 with 6 Ks. That's why you pay sometimes for a relief pitcher. That's why you go up and in for him, because there were times in this game he got Shohei to strike out. Now, one of them, it was a looking strikeout, but even still, and by the way, it looked like it was a strike. Outside corner, perfect location. Tanner Scott has been a baller for this team. Basically, every relief pitcher. Now, I am a little bit worried about who exactly is going to be available. It is the postseason. And I do worry about your Morejons, right? I do worry about your Yuki Matsuis. I do worry a tiny bit about Brian Hoeing, despite the fact that he's been very good for this team. So that it remains to be seen how that's going to go. But even still, it's hard to complain about this, right? He drew 5 swings and misses also against Ohtani. It's very, very hard to complain. I just think that, this Padres team, man, they have the magic. They absolutely do, and they deserve all the credit in the world. I was nervous the entire time. I imagine you guys were too. Shouts to Robert Suarez. That was amazing to see him go 4 outs. Again, shouts to Josh Hader, who infamously would not do such a thing. And Padres go out and get the W. And man, it feels good, man. It feels really, really good. Despite all the dumb narratives that we've talked about that have transpired over the last 48 hours, especially some that have a little bit of an edge that don't sit right with me, frankly. It was weird seeing Rosenthal on the broadcast interviewing players. The mid-interview or the mid-game interview is always just weird to me. I don't know what it is. There's just something about it from the players where it's I don't know. In any sport, really. I don't know. It's just always weird to me. But anyway, really, really crazy stuff. But even crazier is, guys, we've got one more game. Or hopefully one more game. My bad. I don't mean to jinx it or anything. But it was announced. I read this from Kevin AC. It's been reported by AJ Catswell, everybody else. Dylan Cease is going to start game 4 for the Padres. That tells me that they're we need to win this now. Right? We don't want to go back to LA. And hopefully they can win. It's not that they can't win in LA, but that's what they're thinking. Whew, this is tough. With a home crowd, I think that what they're hoping is that you get the good Dylan Cease, because obviously he was not that. What was it on Saturday? In which the Padres lost. Last start, 3 1/3. He gave up 5 earned runs on 6 hits, 2 walks, 5 Ks. Made the bad pitch to Ohtani. Obviously, that was the big one. I do think that this is one of those things where he could have a short leash, and I do think that Martin Perez could be someone that we see in this game. I could even see a situation in which Dylan Cease does great for 3 2/3 or maybe 4 innings, right? I could see that, and then I could see them doing a piggyback start is what I call it, right? Where it's kind of you're basically using 2 starting pitchers or a long inning reliever, and that counts as 1 full start, basically. I could see that occurring. I could also just seeing them say, you know what, our bullpen is awesome, and we're just going to trust those guys again to try and shut down these hitters, especially the guys like Ohtani, right? And especially, hopefully, Mookie Betts, he did have 2 hits in this game, and we're worried about him, Teoscar Hernandez. But the rest of that Dodgers lineup isn't as intimidating, so it's going to be really interesting to see how they deploy their bullpen. Who do you use against which batters? Because for me, this is going to be the Dylan Cease for Shohei Ohtani thing is going to be really nerve-wracking, right? He gave up the same home run to him that he gave up to him when he was in Chicago that was trending all over baseball on ESPN and everything, right? So we're going to see how that goes. They need Dylan Cease to step up. I like the call, and I like that they're basically saying, you know what, we got to go with this now. It's going to be something, man. It's going to be something. And I will say, again, I'm sorry that I'm complaining again and doing on this, but 2 things. First of all, Fernando Tatis Jr., his Instagram story, at least by the time right after the game, he had a, one of, those, it's not an emoji, but it's those, well, some are emojis, and then there's on Instagram stories, you can add the little stickers or whatever. He put on his story or with the Padres post a peacock and then a dancing guy separately. So yeah, safe to say that he read the Ken Rosenthal article and he was like, what the heck is that? Or at least someone told him about it, whatever. Tatis, man. My guy just is not above it. He is absolutely not taking no high road with any of this stuff. And he lives for stuff like this. So we love that. And then also, again, not to be this complaining gossiper too much, but For a team that the media is, or at least a lot of the media, not everybody, right? Like, to be very clear, I brought up around the horn, is trying to act like the Dodgers are the underdog and that the Padres are a villain, which is crazy. Guys, I don't care if they got some. You can't call the team that has won the NL West like 12 years in a row the underdog, who also spent $1 billion plus in the offseason. I know that a lot of that went to Ohtani, but even still, you also gave money to Glasnow, you gave money to Teoscar Hernandez and whatnot. That team is the underdog now, and the team that, by the way, lost its owner. And by the way, its owner, by some reports, was trying to lead an initiative to like oust or prevent John Fisher and the A's from doing what they've done, right? And unfortunately, that lost momentum after Peter Seidler's passing. It's like, it's amazing, right? Like, you can really see stuff like this. The excitement of Tatis, the type of player that kids watch, and they're like, I want to be like that dude, right? Like, they love watching players like that, you know? And a team that has the Peter Seidler stuff, a team that historically was a nothing. The Padres were a nothing burger. An absolute nothing burger. Did they have some fun years? Of course they did. Did they have some great Hall of Famers? Of course they do, right? They even had some players who just played for them for a little bit that were Hall of Famers, like Ricky Henderson, right? Like, but in majority, they've been pretty irrelevant, and they changed the script. You know, the Seidlers came in, AJ Preller came in, who was at the game and it was very funny seeing him. It's always funny seeing AJ Preller. I don't know if I mentioned to my listeners and viewers that I went to a Mets game last year, and I swear I ran into him, but it was so jarring that he would be like at the front gate where like us commoners go, you know what I'm saying? And he was like on the phone talking, like walking fast. I didn't get a second. If that happened again, or if AJ Preller for some reason knows about this show, hi, I was at the Mets game, so shouts to you, sir. You looked great. He was probably locked in, ready to make some move, right? But all in all, that's where we are. And I can't wait. I can't wait for tonight's game. It's going to be nuts. And I can't wait for the rest of the baseball games in general. It's going to be really interesting to see how the Mets and Phillies goes down. It's going to be really interesting with Tigers, Guardians, and Yankees, Royals with Jazz Chisholm. Basically the Yankees kind of version of Tatis a little bit, where he's saying, oh, they got lucky and all that stuff. The Royals. So playoff baseball has been absolutely sensational to watch so far. And I am really, really excited. But I will tell you, Dylan Cease, that is a choice. That is a choice. They need, because and the thing about Dylan Cease is, it would not shock me if he's as bad as he was in the last start. It would certainly not shock me if he goes 4 innings, 2 hits, and 6 Ks. Like, that would not shock me either, because he is capable of that. The problem is, unlike Musgrove and, well, before last night, unlike King, it feels like he's a little bit more of a coin flip. You don't know which version of him you're going to get. But I will say, you would have assumed that Michael King would have been a huge advantage, and he got blown up, right? This is just how the playoffs can be sometimes, where guys like Martin Perez, and again, we talked about this before the postseason. I know I'm rambling a little bit here, but, you know, Jordan Montgomery was like the big star of the playoffs last year. Fine pitcher, but he's not Scherzer. He's not Verlander, like these Hall of Fame caliber pitchers. And yet he was kind of the story of the playoffs last year, right? So pitching can sometimes, it's not that like really bad pitchers show up, but like those middling ones, they can have decent postseason runs. It happens. And while, yes, Martin Perez, if he does make an appearance in tonight's game, he does scare me with the fact that his FIP is way, way, way too high with the Padres, and it suggests he's been getting a little bit lucky. I do like that his strikeout rate has gone up. So if you can just get us through some innings, if Cease, does some of the role, we'll see, man. Gotta root for it, man. I can't wait. Just one more game. And if the Padres win this one, folks, you are going to see me in a absolute demon, sage, rambling, barbaric state on tomorrow's podcast if the Padres win this game.
Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you can place that bet on, how about the first game of week 6 of the NFL, for example. Thursday night features an NFC West rivalry game, the Niners and the Seahawks. FanDuel has Geno Smith and Brock Purdy pretty close in passing yards on their props. The total for Purdy's passing yards, 253.5, while Smith, 248.5. The passing game hasn't been consistently there for the beaten up Niners this year. I might be tempted to take Smith to have the most passing yards, which FanDuel has at even odds. So what are you waiting for? That's FanDuel.com to get started. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Dodgers are one game away from elimination.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We've seen a lot of this type of Dodger playoff moments, especially in these last 10 years. And while the series is not over, the Dodgers' backs are against the wall. They are one game away from elimination. They're also one game away from coming back home and having a Game 5 winner take all. Unfortunately, this game, the offense did put up 5 runs, but the bad part is that the Dodgers defense and Walker Buehler, 6 runs came in during those times, and it all came in one inning. And it was one of those innings that you'll never want to ever see again.
Yeah, the crazy thing is that it was the veterans who are known for their defense who their defense cost the Dodgers. You know, their hindsight's 2020. The Freeman play, I get it. It's a funky thing. Obviously, in hindsight, once he saw Machado veering inside, he probably should have just pivoted and tossed to the pitcher covering first base and get an out. The Rojas one was just baffling and inexcusable. One of the things that frustrated me about this game, John Smoltz has been mostly tolerable for me this series, but I don't understand the point of having a former player as a color commentator if he can't say the words, "That was a bad play by Rojas." Like they're praising Jackson Merrill's hustle. He ran hard. That's what you're supposed to do, especially when you're 21 years old. It was a terrible play by Rojas to have what should have been a double play grounder, definitely should have been at least a fielder's choice, and get 0 outs of it. And you know, it came back to haunt them big time, because if Rojas if he flips that ball to Lux, they get 1 out there, the Dodgers win this game. It was just so frustrating, like just a terrible decision by Rojas. I don't know if his physical limitations were part of the reason he didn't get to the bag in time, or if it was just a bad decision. But either way, he knew about his physical limitations too. Just that play kind of encapsulated Rojas is only playing because of his defense. He's injured and he's gutting it out because of his defense. And then his defense cost the Dodgers the game. And you wouldn't know it by listening to the color commentator. Just never even threw out the possibility that maybe Rojas should have flipped the ball to the guy standing on the bag, you know?
Yeah, it was. I still don't understand that play. There's a screenshot of no runner in the frame, the runner at second, or the defender at second, and Rojas with the ball. And I think the comment or the caption just said this wasn't an out. And yeah, that's basically what it looked like. Like, I just don't know what he was thinking. Like, you have Walker Buehler up there, who you know is a guy that's not going to strike many people out. So, you know, the fact of the matter is you get outs whenever you can. Freddie, if Freddie's healthy, I don't know if he has a, ability to get up and throw that ball. I don't know if that changes anything. Maybe it decides him to turn around and toss it to Buehler, who was covering first base. I don't know. I'm not going to say that him being compromised really affected that play. It was a heads up play by Machado. Like he hit for everything that has been said about Machado. Like, that was a great play by him to do that. And, ended up prolonging the inning, and everything else that prolonged the inning. And then Walker Buehler lost a little bit of command and didn't get pitches where he wanted to, or at least I hope they weren't where he wanted them. And that whole inning got away from them, and that's all it took. And yeah, it's one of those where I think the first couple of segments here, I'm definitely going to be upset and, mad and frustrated and everything else. And then in the last segment, I'll kind of say why I'll feel different going into tomorrow's game. But yeah, it's one of those things where, for all the talk, of this team's different and they're walking around and blah, blah, blah. And I keep mentioning that part. But then all the talk about, like, Dave Roberts bringing up, the Machado thing, which seems overblown. Max Muncy saying, guys are throwing the bats in there 30 feet when they hit a single to get the crowd going at Petco Park. Like, just shut up and just play at this point and play better than you've been playing.
Yeah, and I don't even care about the shut up part. I just care about the play better part. I think the shut up part is irrelevant. They want to talk, that's fine. They want to shut up, that's fine. None of it has any impact on anything on the field. They just need to hit the ball better, and in this case, catch and throw the ball better too. And talking about Buehler, I've seen a lot of people say, "Oh, Buehler was awesome. He got it was a wasted gem by him," and Buehler wasn't awesome. The fact is, all 6 runs were technically earned. The most charitable way of describing it, it's 3 earned runs, because realistically, on that throwing error by Freeman, they called it a fielder's choice, and only the error for Machado advancing to third. They didn't assume the out at second. I assume because he was on his knees, so that's beyond ordinary effort to make that throw. But if you give Freeman an error on that throw, allowing Machado to get to second, then Machado's run is unearned, and a rise pop-up would have been the 3rd out of the inning before Tatis's homer. So, but even then, that's 3 earned runs in 5 innings, and it's not a great outing. And the big issue, besides the defense in that inning, was that Buehler doesn't have strikeout stuff, and especially against a team like the Padres that don't strike out. But 0 strikeouts in 5 innings is very few, even against a team like the Padres. That's not, the Padres don't strike out a lot, but they strike out more than 0 times and 3 times through the lineup most games. And that inning, that's what we saw. They weren't hitting the ball hard until they did. Peralta hit the double hard, and obviously Tatis's home run was blistered. But in situations where you need a strikeout, he was getting ground balls that the defense wasn't turning into outs, and some of them because they got through the infield, some of them because of bad plays. But all in all, like, it's hard to be successful as a pitcher if you don't have any strikeout stuff at all. And that was one of the big issues with Buehler tonight.
Yeah, Buehler, the biggest thing Buehler did, and obviously Roberts aided in that regard, was giving them 5 innings when he probably shouldn't have gotten more than 2 innings, and saving the bullpen a little bit for now what we know is a bullpen game in game 4. But for me, these guys are like, what is David Peralta doing when he's standing there at the plate that these guys are saying, oh, let me just hang a pitch or put a pitch where it shouldn't be? Like, for everything, yes, Walker should have been out of that inning more than likely. Yes, Walker had to throw way more pitches than anything else, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, like, he had 1-2 on Peralta, and it wasn't a bad pitch. It was, a cutter that moved, but it wasn't where it should have been. And the way Peralta swung at the first couple he swung at least one of them against Buehler, throw another fastball high in there. Like, that might not be Buehler's call, or he took what Will gave him, or whatever the case was. Like I said, the pitch that he made wasn't terrible, but why give Peralta some soft stuff to swing at when you can just, climb the ladder and go up there where he probably wasn't going to hit the ball. And if he was going to pop up. And then to Tatis, 0-2, throw anything other than a fastball down the middle, like literally
anything other than the worst pitch you've ever thrown in your life. Yeah. Giving up RBIs to David Peralta is infuriating. Like I said the other day, for a team that knows all of the holes in his swing very, very intimately after playing against him for years and then having him on their team last year, it's hard to accept that. All in all, and it was that 1 inning. That was all of the Padres runs. And the Dodgers were done scoring after the 3rd inning too. They could have stopped the game then, saved all the pitching. But in the end, it was infuriating. That's what that inning was.
Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you can place that bet on, how about the first game of week 6 of the NFL, for example. Thursday night features an NFC West rivalry game, the Niners and the Seahawks. FanDuel has Geno Smith and Brock Purdy pretty close in passing yards on their props. The total for Purdy's passing yards, 253.5, while Smith, 248.5. The passing game hasn't been consistently there for the beaten up Niners this year. I might be tempted to take Smith to have the most passing yards, which FanDuel has at even odds. So what are you waiting for? That's FanDuel.com to get started. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's a recruiting flip, and we haven't done this in a while. But
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes.
since the Miami Hurricanes have just flipped 4-star wide receiver Joshua Moore, he flips from the Florida Gators to the Miami Hurricanes. It just happened tonight. We had to put out the bat signal to bring in our recruiting overlord, Brian Smith, who, of course, has covered West Broward. He's covered Josh Moore. He actually sent me the photo he took of Josh Moore to use for the episode cover on this one. So, Brian, first and foremost, are you surprised that this flip happened? Because ever since Miami beat Florida head-to-head, seems like Josh, he was on campus at Miami a couple days later. It seemed to be trending in this direction.
No offense to Florida, but why would you pick that program as a sinking ship? So, no, I am not surprised at all. They're better than they were, but that staff's in trouble. Everybody wants to play for a stable coaching situation. Yeah, not surprised at all.
All right, so let's talk about Josh Moore, the player, because first of all, very productive South Floridian, and he's got that size that Miami fans crave at that position. Miami's, of course, they've done a really good job in recent cycles, landing a lot of slot type body types and more. 6'4", 205 pounds is his listing on 247sports.com. What can Miami fans expect from the West Broward standout?
He's faster than most kids his size. He reminds me, ironically, quite a bit of Hakeem Williams in terms of body type and style. He'll go by you, even though he's 6'3" and 200 plus pounds. But he's also a guy that he can run comebacks, curls, and basic routes like that, run over a guy or run around a guy. He's got some versatility to his game already, just like most kids, needs to clean up a little things with how he changes direction and all that. That's just footwork stuff you get better with. If he catches the ball away from his body, he'll make contested catches. And it doesn't matter what part of the field. He's not just a one-dimensional guy. Does he play right away with Miami's depth chart? That might be asking a little bit. But by his sophomore year, he'll be a guy that could really make some noise. I just can't stress this enough. Big-bodied receivers like Joshua are rare. Forget what their ranking is and just know this is a numbers game. There are very few guys that have Josh's size that can run like him. So he's worth more than what his recruiting value is. You got to have those boundary receivers. If you don't, you're not going to win the elite games.
I don't know what the answer is to this question. Maybe you do, or if there even is a definitive answer, but we get this question from Edwin Rivera, who's, that's not the question. A question from Matthew Catalina, who says, who's better, Josh Moore or Dallas Wilson?
Dallas Wilson. Dallas is more polished. Same player, he's just more polished. Like he's played at Tampa Tech. They got a receiver coach there who's put multiple guys in the NFL. Joshua has the chance to be just as good, if not better, but he's just not as polished. Otherwise, they're pretty much the same guy. Joshua's slightly heavier, but they can both really run and change directions at 6'3". That never goes out of style, brother.
And just so Edwin knows, I'm not ducking your question. I'm not, because we're going to talk about that a little bit before this episode is done. We got the recruiting overlord with us, and so. All right, so when I said at the top, some Miami fans were freaking out a little bit about wide receiver recruiting because, Miami recently lost Malachi Tony to a decommit. The only receiver Miami currently had committed before this Joshua Moore flip is Dalen Upshaw, who I hear is still trending pretty solidly to Miami. But you actually, Brian, you might know this better than me because you cover Auburn recruiting so closely. What's been the buzz up there? Because I know he's taken a lot of visits to Auburn. They're working for a flip of Dalen Upshaw.
Well, that's the question. Like, I know Dalen really well, and I saw him at an Auburn game recently and talked to him on the sideline. I don't know if they're pushing for him or not, because early on they were not. He'd have committed there if they'd have taken his commitment early, like February, something like that. I don't know what that situation is now because Auburn sucks. They are bad. And hey, man, I go to their games. They find ways to lose. It's not a matter of talent.
Yeah.
They find ways to lose. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
They may not win an SEC game. They're that bad. But he lives right down the road. He goes to the same high school Cam Coleman did, so he's 45 minutes from campus, be closer to all his family and stuff. And this area is really tight with family. So maybe, but I don't know if Auburn's pushing. And like, look, which one's got more stability in the program? It's the same thing as with Joshua Moore leaving UF to go to Miami. Like, it's not that hard. So I'm not so certain. They got to show something, or I don't think Dalen would take it. That's just my opinion. I haven't asked him recently, but I'd be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, the latest, I know Gabby Arruti at Inside the U had some intel on that recently. And of course, nobody really knows until, December, right? But he mentioned something about how folks still feel pretty confident about, Dalen to the U. But obviously, certainly you follow the visits. You mentioned, in that community, he's been to some Auburn games and stuff like that. So it's been a situation to monitor. But, we'll talk about what Miami has and what Miami has just gotten in this verbal commitment from Joshua Moore. What this does for Miami's recruiting ranking now. He becomes Miami's 22nd verbal commit in this cycle. And who might be next? Because I'll tell you, folks, between now and National Signing Day in December, Miami is only shooting for the stars. They're only fishing for whales right now. Like they're not, looking to add 3-star guys. They're looking for potential big flips down the road.
Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you can place that bet on, how about the first game of Week 6 of the NFL, for example. Thursday night features an NFC West rivalry game, the Niners and the Seahawks. FanDuel has Geno Smith and Brock Purdy pretty close in passing yards on their props. The total for Purdy's passing yards, 253.5, while Smith, 248.5. The passing game hasn't been consistently there for the beaten up Niners this year. I might be tempted to take Smith to have the most passing yards, which FanDuel has at even odds. So what are you waiting for? That's FanDuel.com to get started. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Did he quit on the team?
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Bengali Kamara announced that he is going to redshirt and sit out the remainder of the year and then plans to enter the transfer portal. Now, this sparked a lot of reaction. I wouldn't say outrage, but just a lot of reaction from fans all over. This is a growing trend, and we're going to get into the trend as well as get into him specifically and what it means for the team and all that good stuff. And I think the fan, a lot of the fans feel like that person is quitting on the team. I'm going to give you a different perspective on it. But also, I'm not going to disagree with you. Okay. So if you don't know what's happening, it's this new trend that's happening in college football. We saw it start really with the Matthew Sluka, the quarterback at UNLV, who decided he was going to sit out the rest of the year because of an NIL disagreement. And then he was going to enter the transfer portal by the end of the season. That was like 3 games into the year. There was a disagreement. They didn't get something in writing. I don't know. Both sides are probably to blame. The truth is always somewhere in between. That's what a lot of wise people always tell me. So I don't know who, and I'm not going to pretend to know anything about UNLV's NIL situation. But now we have seen this become a consistent, more consistent practice from some players. Remember, the redshirt rule in college football right now says you can play in 4 games. You don't like, it's not like it used to be where it's like, well, you have to sit out the entire year. You can play in 4 games and you still can redshirt and sit out a year. We saw it 2 days ago with South Carolina's upcoming opponent, Jaheim Otis, who was a starter as a freshman, like a 4-star top 100 recruit, kid that came in, lost like 75 pounds his freshman year so he could earn the starting job, and then decided, you know what? After 2 years, it didn't get as much playing time. He posted something yesterday saying that he had decided to redshirt and blah, blah, blah. The season hadn't gone the way they thought it would. Whatever. I'm gonna set that aside for a second to talk about how this specifically, the reaction is to be. Let's hold our judgments on these kids quitting. And I'm going to let you in on a little story time about me personally. I played college baseball, as I've mentioned on here before. I quit the team my junior year. I was upset about something. I was 20, 21 years old. I was even more emotional than I am on those instant overreaction videos that I post. Back then, I was even more emotional. And I got upset about something that was stupid, something that grown me knows was stupid now, and I quit. And then once I said I quit, I was too embarrassed to go back and then say, you know what, I was in the wrong, and then not do it. It's something I've regretted for most of my adult life, like just to be honest. And I'm not saying that's what this kid is going to feel, but I will say the quitting part, I at least understand the emotion and the feelings that go into it, because these are 18 to 22-year-old kids that are already running hot on emotions in general and don't have, they're not fully formed adults yet. They have a lot of people in their ear now. And I at least get, this is going to sound like an odd way to phrase it, but the indecision of the decision, if that makes sense. I get the fact that it's like, so-and-so, I'm going to get more playing time. Like, what if the grass is greener over here? Like, now more than ever, you're going to see that type of not fully thought through decision-making from 18 to 22-year-old kids. So I get that. I'm not going to be mad at him for making the decision. What I will say, from my own personal experience, you might regret it one day, man. You might regret it one day. And I will also say, doing it 4 games in, the Jaheim Otis one in particular was like, it was blatantly obvious that decision was made and it influenced heavily from an agent. I don't know if that's the case with Bengali Kamara. I don't. He's only played 70 total snaps in the season. He did just play a season high 30 snaps against Ole Miss. So it's not like something that's like growing frustrations with not being able to play, because he just played a season high snap total against Ole Miss, 30 total snaps. 30 of his 70 total snaps came this weekend. That's right off the top of my head. 30 out of 70. That's 42.9% on the dot. Check it at home. So, he also had 23 against Kentucky. Now, an overwhelming amount of his total snaps came in those 2 games, and I don't know if he had frustrations. He clearly wasn't seeing as much of the field as he probably wanted to see. But it's also a kid that I think he went into college in 2020. He's a transfer from Pitt. He's not going to transfer again. It's his 3rd season. It's a growing trend that's happening in college football, and it sucks. It sucks. I'm not going to come down on this kid and say, you're an idiot, you're making a bad decision, this is stupid, blah, blah, blah. What I am going to say, are we sure the grass is always green on the other side? It's not. It's usually not. If you can go play, because listen, not everyone's going to make the NFL. I'm not saying this to be rude. Maybe he flourishes wherever he goes. But maybe you just want to go play your final year. Then hats off to you, man. Go do it. I fully respect that. Totally get it. But if this is something that is being influenced by an agent, which are now legally a part of the game, that sucks. Jaheim Otis posted that whole thing yesterday from Alabama, and he brought up the fact that he's like, please respect my decision. Any questions or things that you guys want to discuss or interests or whatever, please talk to my agents. He lists the agents' names, which that was the agent typing it out for him, listing their own names. And now he's done. I don't see, and here's the other part that's weird about it, but it's October 8th. Yeah, midterms. like I don't know the entire school schedule, but I know we're around there. I don't know if you stay in school for this semester, if you pull out completely, if you like I don't know all that. I do know that agents being involved legally in this game, there are very few. Not listen, Jerry Maguire's a great movie. That is not how sports agents work. That's not how. Anytime someone's coming to you like, "Hey, let me get a piece of your money and your potential earnings by guiding you with what I think is your best interest," usually doesn't have your best interest in mind, guys. Shocking take there, huh? Shocking take. Now, let's go through some of the stuff there. Like I don't know all the ins and outs of it. I'm sure we'll learn more as it comes out. But it's frustrating. It is frustrating. So, listen, so these are some of the numbers from so the 2020 season did not count toward Kamar's eligibility because of the COVID year, remember? He played each of the next 3 seasons, totaling 37 games while amassing 115 tackles, including 11.5 tackles for a loss, while collecting 5 quarterback sacks. On this season so far, I immediately went to PFF to see what he graded out. There's no data for it because he hasn't redshirted enough snaps for that to happen. He's got 9 total tackles, 2 assisted, 7 solo, 1 tackle for loss for -1 yard. Not trying to be a dick, not trying to be rude, not exactly a guy that is going to be super heavily missed. He's 12th in the defense in total tackles. You know, like I think they'll be okay. I think they'll be okay. But just a weird situation. I'll tell you what I think bothers me more than anything, and it does stem from the Jaheim Otis thing and the Sluka thing, is not just the agents getting involved because the disagreements on the money part, but what worries me about this is like the future of this that worries me is, what if you get off to a fast start? Like, what if you get off to a 4-0 start? Kind of like the Sluka kid, the quarterback, right? Like UNLV was 3-0. He was putting up good numbers. That also, by the way, Sluka specifically is a kid that transferred in July, I think, from a different school. He had been at UNLV for like 2 months. If you have no allegiances to that school, like that I think as a college football fan, that's what sucks the most. Like as a fan, we sit here and we're so prideful of our teams and the traditions and like the pageantry and all those things. And it's something that outsiders don't get, and we don't really care if they get it or not, because it's not like we're going to change. This is our thing, right? This is like our thing. You don't have to get it. I love it, right? Like it's what makes college football so great. It sucks that this whole situation being impacted by people who probably don't give a blank about college football, right? Like that's the one thing that's been so bothersome to me through all of this is all of these decisions that have consistently been made, whether it be about NIL, whether it be about conference realignment, TV contracts, all these other things, they have been influenced and impacted and like they impact the fan a ton. It's the last person that they have factored into the decision. It's the last person they have factored into the decision as the fan. It's your consumer. It's your consumer. And they're like, we don't care. There's so much money to be made. Who cares? Who cares if the people that are watching our product give a blank about how we're handling the product? It's tough. But it's just the reality of where we are in college sports, and it's not going to change anytime soon.